Good morning, dear friends. Welcome. How are you? Great to have you here on this crisp Erev Shabbos, October 28th, the 3rd of Cheshvan. It's a crisp 78 degrees outside here in South Florida. Winter is really coming, and we're here to start a brand new chapter in our journey through the entire Talmud. Of course, we are studying one page, one line at a time. Presently, Masechah Shabbos, and for the first time this year, chapter 20, Perek Rabbi Eliezer, Perek Toilin, the chapter that starts with the subject of Toilin. It's going to be a total change of subject, change of pace. So pardon the whiplash. I want to read for you the one-line summary of this chapter presented by the Mesivta Talmud. As you know, we have a few different resources on the Gemara, but they say this chapter will talk about two subjects. A, those things that are prohibited on Shabbos, midirabanan, those things that are rabbinically prohibited, and B, things that are permitted to be done, although they seem very much akin to melachot. This chapter, in another language, might be described as a chapter of miscellaneous, loosely associated Shabbos topics. The association is mostly what we just mentioned, things that are prohibited midrabanan and things that are permitted. The opening discussion will be management of a wine strainer and other food prep related things. We're going to touch upon construction and other related matters. So sit back, relax. And again, this is going to be a little bit, in a way, familiar with some of the other discussions that we've had in Masechah Shabbos. And it's so wonderful that you're here. Again, we are making our initial descent to the conclusion of Masechah Shabbos, 20 blocks. That's 40 pages left, which sounds like a lot, but not if you consider how much we've already covered and how much we've already studied. And so, Mirza Hashem, my hope is that this season, when the largest number of our Chabur members are in town, we should be able to make a very joyous and over-the-top celebration of Bli Neder of this great accomplishment. And we are accomplishing every day as we study through the Talmud. I'm going to share the screen. We'll pull up our new chapter. That's not it. And we'll get started. Go. Let's see if they held our place. Just about. I must say, just as we find the place, I very much enjoyed last chapter, although it was a very different pace, different style, but it was it allowed some unique kind of discussions. And shalom aleichem. Welcome back. Good to see you. All righty. A special Yid just arrived in Shul from Eretz Yisrael. Whenever a Jew comes from Israel, we have to give them a special greeting. They bring a special kiddush, and we hope that we'll join them in returning to Israel B'Karov. All right, here's our new Mishnah, Toilin, which is the name of the chapter, the way it's printed in the Talmud. So again, we saw this Mishnah yesterday. It's a discussion about a strainer, a mishameres, and if and how it may be used on Shabbos, if and how it may be used and positioned on Yontif. There are two primary possible challenges, two primary issues with a strainer. Who wants to take a guess at what the issues may be?
Borer.
Oh, so number one, borer.
You're
straining.
separating the good from the bad.
Separating, yes, borer. And number two, which is actually going to turn out to be maybe a more fundamental issue, is the construction of a structure of sorts, a tent, because you're spreading material over a frame, or you're hanging and suspending
That's
it
what
over
Rashi
some
says.
posts. I'm
That's
sorry?
I said that's what Rashi says.
Yes. And so it has a form or an approximate appearance of a structure. And so there's two issues that are going to be discussed: the issue of straining, the issue of the structure. The Gemara too is going to relate to the issue the way Rashi references it. And so we're going to take a look at Rashi in a moment, and we'll get started. I just got to make a post over here on WhatsApp, starting a new chapter. All righty. Hold on, we have everybody on. Okay, everyone's here. Here's Rashi. Toilin es hamishameres. You can suspend toilin hang, and you see Rabbi Steinsaltz adds in the word stretch over a base so that we understand. Oh, hold on. One more thing. I'm going to share with you the image of the strainer as presented by the Steinsaltz Gemara. Beautiful illustration. And let's see if I can pull up my WhatsApp. Let's see. Hopefully it's loading. There we go. There we go. Hey. That's not fair. Okay. Sorry, one more time. Pardon me, folks. Abura. Here we go. So this is how they imagine the strainer. In Talmudic times, a strainer consisted of a rim with a handle above it. Straining was accomplished by fabric that was stretched over the rim and tied at the bottom. So I think we have to ignore this line that's running through the middle, but imagine that there is a circular frame that has a handle on it, and the fabric was stretched all around the edges, and the liquid dripped through it, and I guess the solids remained on top. I don't know if I would have exactly imagined that it looked like this, but the Steinsaltz usually brings, based on other sources, what life might have been in that time. So we can imagine this is something like what a strainer may appear. So but what we're discussing here is stretching the fabric over the frame. That's approximately where my cursor is indicating. Back to the Gemara. To Rashi. Rabbi Lazar says one can stretch out, spread out, set up the strainer on Yontiv. You cannot set it up on Shabbos, but v'noislim l'tuluya b'Shabbos, one could utilize a preset strainer on Shabbos. Two issues. Perhaps the toilin is the building part or reminiscent of building, and then v'noislim, that would be reminiscent to straining. The Chachamim say, no, on Yontiv you cannot set it up, but perhaps you could strain with it on Yontiv if it's already set up. And in Shabbos, even if it is set up, one mustn't use it. That's the essence of the Mishnah. Two issues: setting up the strainer and utilizing the strainer 2 times, Shabbos and Yontiv. 2 opinions, Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim.
Rabbi,
Yes.
why would there even be a question of boina if it's already set up?
No. If it's already set up, the issue is not boina. The issue is straining, filtering. Boira.
Right, that remains, of course.
Regards from Reb Eli, who's on a plane now, so he can't join us right now. All righty, let's see Rashi. Toilin es hamishameres. You can hang. Again, this is a quote of the Rabbi Elazar says. Why would you do this? Shmisanenim ba shimre yayin. It's used to filter the sediment, the shemarim of wine. Moteach, Dr. Stamler, I might need your help with the Hebrew translation. Moteach pia lechaltzad, that you stretch out tightly, right?
Yes.
The material on all directions. Be'igul, in a circular frame. V'naseh ke'ohel al chalal hakli, and it becomes like a tent stretching out over the empty area of this frame. Shekoidim Shtanda, Afagav the Ovid Oyel Shari Biyantif. Even though building a tent may be permissible on Shabbos, Kidim Mefarish B'Gemara. I'm sorry, Afagav the Ovid Oyel, although in a way this is creating an Oyel Shari Biyantif. This activity can be done on Yantif. Kidim Mefarish B'Gemara, as the Gemara will explain the reasoning behind Rabbi Eliezer's license to do so. Abel B'Shabbos, Milsa Mitla Lechatchila Loi. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to hang it. Again, this is all the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. If it is already set up, it's already hanging. One can place sediment or misanin ein derech boyer bekach. And Rashi gives us a 1-line explanation that we'll see in the Gemara. This is not really boyer. Why isn't it boyer? We'll see. So Rashi, had we not seen the picture, Had we not read Rabbi Steinsaltz, Rashi would have given us a very clear image. You have a circular frame. You stretch out the material. It functions as a strainer. Rabbi Elazar says on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, you could do that, set up and strain. On Shabbos, you cannot set it up, but you can strain it. And of course, the Chachamim are going to take it a notch further to be more strict and to say that one is permitted. I'm sorry, the Chachamim say on Shabbos, no straining action. And on Yom Tov, you can use it, but you cannot set it up. That's the essence, that's the crux of the Mishnah. Of course, the Gemara is going to ask a number of questions, which afford us the opportunity to clarify more specifically the halachot, the laws of the strainer on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And of course, it's going to boil down to the opinions, the characters, if you will, that are brought in the Mishnah, and to see if it is consistent with their perspective. Sorry,
Rabbi,
yes.
why would this occur? Would they be straining wine just before they drink it?
Beryl, you're asking actually a very good question. I think your question is veering into Tosfos's territory. You're asking a very good question. Why are they straining the wine now? What would happen if we'd strain the wine in the wine store?
Before Shabbos,
or before Yom Tov. So Tosfos makes like a one-line comment that addresses your question. If you may recall that on Yom Tov, you're allowed to do any malacha that prepares your food. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
According to one opinion, assuming that you cannot do it before Yom Tov, and according to Rabbi Elazar, even if you could do it before Yom Tov, but assuming that there is a better quality if you do it right away. So Tosfos says real fast, Sarach lefarish v'leimar, Im haya oiseo me'esma lahaya loy haya toiv kol kach v'chazak. We can assume that the reason why it is permitted is because it is advantageous to strain your wine, to prepare your wine right before drinking and not a day or 2 or 3 before. And indeed, we learned not long ago that we cannot strain mustard on Yom Tov because it could have been done prior to Shabbos. So Beryl, you very, very acutely, very keenly honed into an important issue, that it is much preferred to do this act of straining right before you drink. Now, Rashi, and I know Dr. Stamler noticed this, Rashi doesn't seem to be talking about filtering wine. He seems to be talking about filtering out the dregs of wine. So the way it reads, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, I'm just sharing with you my thought process. It sounds like you finished your bottle of wine, but you don't pour it to the end. Because if you pour the last 2 fingers, if you will, of wine, there's a lot of sediment. And so at a certain point, you take that sediment, you pour it through a strainer, and then you extract another cup or another l'chaim shot glass, or maybe you have a few bottles like that, and then you get yourself another. Maybe I read it wrong. But Dr. Stalman, does that sound like what Rashi was saying?
Yes.
So let's just put that in our bank of perspectives of knowledge. I will note that the art scroll, Rabbi Steinsaltz in his portrayal does not show us wine or even shamorim. Here he shows us grapes. So I can imagine that maybe this filter was used for different times for different functions. Sometimes it was used to catch.
By the way, shmarim is yeast.
Shmarim is what?
Yeast.
Yeast?
Yeast. I think they use yeast to ferment the wine.
So you're saying
That's
maybe shmarim is
process.
The thing that triggers the fermentation process.
That's why it's called a meshameret, I think.
Really?
I think.
That's interesting.
Because where does the word come from?
And I said when he walked in, I said
a strainer, a meshameret is not a strainer. It's a
No, I think shmarim are dregs. Shmarim are the stuff that's in the bottom.
Shmarim, Google shmarim in Hebrew if you have, or look in a dictionary, you'll see shmarim.
What comes to mind to me is tea. They might be preparing tea that way.
And I think they used to use yeast to ferment the wine, because you need a fermentation process for the bacteria to ferment the wine.
Dr. Stamler, you're right. In Hebrew, in Ivrit, shmarim today means yeast.
I don't know if only today.
Well, for sure today. The question that I have, which I'm learning now in real time with you, is what is the relationship between the word shmarim as yeast to
So I'm telling you, I think the word meshameret, because a mesanenet, sinun, is usually to
so look,
filter.
I just Googled shimrei yain. I don't know which link to open.
Wait. So you see, tzisa spontanit. It's a spontaneous fermentation because
So
you
the
need
mashmaut
bacteria
here
to ferment
is
the wine.
the mashmaut here is that shmarim. Oh, I'll explain to you why. And we may both be correct. Shmarim. Here's my revised. Well, not revised. Here's what I think. Shmarim are the dregs of wine. Happens to be the dregs of wine have already gone through the fermentation process. Maybe when you introduce that to grape juice, that further triggers the process along. And so
It could be the dregs of wine, but originally it's the yeast.
Just like no. I'm saying now to defend my original impression, which may be totally wrong, but just to continue to dig my hole, if you will. I think you know how you take dough. If you take fermented dough, let's say sourdough, you introduce that could become the starter, which because it's already going through a fermentation process. So I believe wine is fermented. If you take some of the fermented wine and you introduce it to grape juice, it'll trigger that process to continue. So what are you going to use? You're not going to use good wine. You'll take the shmarim, you'll take the dregs that have already the fermentation process. They have already the natural bacteria or whatever that induces the process. And when you pour that into a vat of grape juice, it triggers the process. I may be totally wrong, but let's look for a link that I can hack. Shimrei yayin. They're talking here about beer making. Here, winemaking.il. This is a website online in Israel about how to make wine. And the question is, how do you choose shmarim yayin chelik echad? I can't. Tzisa spontanit mul shmarim mitur vatim. Do you want to have a spontaneous, self-created reaction, or do you want to introduce a cultivated Gemara is on the Ma'aseh Yain. תפקידם וסוגים השונים המציעים בתהליך הכנת היין. שמרים הם הייצור המשמעותי ביותר בהפיכת פרי ליין. המרת
סוכרים לאלכוהול. It changes the sugar to alcohol.
What changes sugar to alcohol? The thing that triggers it, which מלבד תפקיד זה יש לו השפעה משמעותית על איכות היין. לטובה ולרע. I bet you never thought we'll be reading a winemaking article on the internet as part of our Gemara share. Mahi tzisa spontanit. Tzisa ba mishtatfim shimrei bar o yain. All right, I'm going to give up. Okay, doctor, I'm willing to hedge my bets. Maybe that's actually the pshat. Maybe shmarim are the yeast, but it ends up being some kind of buildup at the bottom of a barrel or the bottle of a jar or the bottle of and if you strain that out, you'll have more wine. Because what's clear from Rashi, what's clear from the Gemara is that the desire at this point is to extract the good wine. Maybe there is also a function. You know what? Maybe we should learn some of the Gemara, and maybe some of the things we're discussing will be resolved in the Gemara. But perhaps there is value to the shmarim too. This is the Gemara. Our Gemara is going to go back to the beginning, to the first question. And the question is Rabbi Eliezer's license to stretch out this filter consistent with his opinion in other contexts? Hashta, the Gemara asked the question. Rabbi Eliezer, Asofi Oyel, Arai Maloi Moisfinan. Rabbi Eliezer has an anti-tent, an anti-structure viewpoint. He does not allow any construction of an oil. On Shabbos, is it possible that he would ever approve doing this on Yontif? Let's read the Hashter. Rabbi Eliezer doesn't allow you to even add to an already existing oil arai, which would be very lenient and probable to allow. I think he's going to allow the Chatchila Shari. And what does Rabbi Eliezer say here? Toilin. You can do it on Yontif. Mahi, before we go any further, let's identify the text of Rabbi Eliezer, and then we'll compare it to our Mishnah. Ditnan, here's the Mishnah. We learned this Mishnah already together. I'm sorry, remember we talked all about the window shutter, and we had those pictures of them attached and detached. And if you have a window shutter, Rabbi Eliezer says, what's the halacha? Rashi could go in a Ruba Sagag. Maybe you remember there was even a Machlekes Rashi and Tosfos then. Well, for example, what would be a skylight? Something that fills in a hole in the walls and the ceiling. Eliezer says, if it is attached and hanging, you're allowed to use it because it's already attached to the structure. And if it's not attached, you cannot use this shutter. Because when you add it on, you're adding onto a structure. Say no. You're allowed to use this shutter, which is specified to be placed in this hole. He doesn't let you add even a temporary structure. He's certainly not going to allow you to set up a full-fledged structure de novo on Yontif. Let's read a little further. You may be wondering a question about if Shabbos and Yontif are able to be aligned as a question. Well, let's look at the Gemara first. Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Upon this discussion, Rabba Bar Chana quoted Rabbi Yochanan to say, "Hakol moedim she'ein oisem oyel aray betchila Yontif." Everyone agrees that you cannot build an oil aray in the beginning of Yom. And of course, not on Shabbos. The whole question here is because when you put a shutter, you put a board, you're not building a new structure, you're just adding to it. The whole machlokes is only lehoisif. Let's read Rashi. The building is the building, the structure is the structure, and the board just pops in and pops out. In Florida, we have hurricanes, and especially the older buildings, Lamer until they had and the Mount Malaga until they got their impact windows. And we daven for our dear friends at Lamer that they should be able to enjoy their building in peace and tranquility. And the Malaga too, if I could put in a good word.
And the Parker Plaza too. We all
the Parker Plaza, you finally serve as inspiration that eventually it could get better, right?
It could get better, but there's such fights going on, and it doesn't stop no matter what. It continues and keeps on, and one issue stops, and then they raise another issue. When you have a couple of Jews, you have 17 different opinions, and everybody knows what they're doing.
Rabbi, maybe there's a connection with what Menachem is saying with a temporary tent. Who says what is temporary?
Well, I think we're spiraling a little out of control. My whole point was those who used to have shutters know that shutters are occasionally attached, affixed, and removed.
Someone puts it up and doesn't take it down. It's not temporary anymore.
That's true. That's true. All I was going to say is that your apartment is there, the building is there, and the shutter is just a added piece to provide protection, or God forbid a window's broken, then you might put a board to make sure that, I don't know what doesn't come inside, sea salt, sea wind, rain, birds, I don't know. Anyways, so everyone agrees, the whole discussion here is oyel lohaisif. Rabbi Eliezer says, Ein moisifim b'yantif. We don't add to a structure. Ein sarch loimer b'Shabbos. And of course, you can't even add to a pre-existing structure on Yantif or Shabbos unless that addition is already attached. The Chachamim oimrim moisifim b'Shabbos. The Ein Sarch Leimer B'Yantif. The rabbis say, Moisifim b'Shabbos. You could make this addition on Shabbos, but not on Yantif. So what do we see? Bottom line, Rabbi Eliezer is absolutely strict. He would never entertain a new structure, a new oil, a new assembly. Well, no, that's the wrong word. But a new structure, a new thing, a new oil. And now you're telling us in our Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer says, toilin, you could build a structure. So without seeing the black and white, the clear answer of the Gemara, we could probably imagine that there is a distinction to be drawn between a structure and a filter, which is, although it is technically a suspended piece of material that creates some kind of structure, but it's not. It doesn't feel like it should be the same. But that's not what the Gemara ultimately is going to answer. The Gemara is going to give us a more fundamental insight to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer on Yontif, and it's going to boil down to the license for food preparation, which Rabbi Beryl wisely already alluded to. The answer is Rabbi Eliezer Savar Look at Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Eliezer here in our Mishnah who says Toilin is channeling or agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. What does Rabbi Yehuda say to Tanya? Ein bein Yontif l'Shabbos ala oichel nefesh b'lvad. Generally speaking, Yontif is as prohibitive as Shabbos, with an important exception. Oichel nefesh. That's the Tana Kama. Rabbi Yehuda matir af machshir oichel nefesh. Rabbi Yehuda says not only can you do a malacha in the preparation of food, not only can you put food on the fire, but you can also do malachas to set up the preparation. And so, to pour the dregs, to pour the shemarim into the filter, that would just be preparing food. To set up the filter, that's hechsher, that's machsher, that is what facilitates food preparation. Rabbi Eliezer agrees with Rabbi Yehuda that this can be done. Rashi, Hilka Chachashari. Therefore, on Yontif, for food, it's allowed. You're setting up the tool that's going to make your food usable on Yontif. And so here is the deal. Here is this answer. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehuda agree. Usually, there's no way you can build an oyel on Shabbos or even on Yontif, maybe even in addition. It's all totally not good. It's totally not kosher. But you know what? All the restrictions of Shabbos and Yontif are suspended for one type of thing, and that is food preparation. Therefore, you cannot say that Rabbi Eliezer contradicts himself. He is very strict. He's very machmir about oyel, except when food is involved. Dr. Stama, you're talking to us because you're muted. Okay. By the way, yes, Rebero.
Is wine considered food?
Yes. Food and drink. By the way, we talk about Jews and their obsession with food on Yontif. Maybe we're starting to understand where it comes from. It's the only. it's the exception. It's the license to be.
It comes under pikuach nefesh.
No, it was one of the 10 things that Kadosh Baruch Hu created there of Shabbos. Was the affinity of Jews to food.
The shamir.
It's not written anywhere, but.
So that's the answer. But of course, we know the Gemara. The Gemara is going to ask. Hey, more the shamin on lei Rabbi Yehuda, b'machshirin, she'af shalasai some Erev Yontif. Rabbi Yehuda permits only machshirim that cannot be done before Yontif. Machshirim she'af shalasai some Erev Yontif mishamas lei. Let's think about this. Setting up the filter. You're going to need it. It's really desperate. You need it on Yontif. Couldn't remember to do it before Yontif. You had to do it on Yontif. Would Rabbi Yehuda allow you to do a hechsher if you had ample opportunity to do it before Yontif? Where it says, actually, Rabbi Eliezer, adif min Rabbi Yehuda. Indeed, you're right. Rabbi Yehuda would not allow you to do a malach on Yontif if you could have done it on Erev Yontif. You're going shpud shenirtzam b'Yontif. What's nirtzam, Dr. Stamler?
Don't know.
I'm sorry?
No.
Oh, the spit broke on Yontif, so you can fix it. Hechsher oichel. You couldn't have fixed it on Erev Yontif because it wasn't broken. But if you had ample opportunity on Yontif before Yontif to fix it, so then you should. Don't do it on Yontif. So now the Gemara answers, Rabbi Eliezer adifa mid Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Eliezer ultimately is even more powerful in his license, in his permission, in his permissiveness. In the words of Rabbi Steinsaltz, Rabbi Eliezer exceeds, the leniency of Rabbi Eliezer exceeds Rabbi Yehuda. Chazaka, it's even a stronger license. The Hahu Shari Afilu Machshiri and Shav Shemiyantim. Rabbi Eliezer says, you know what? I don't care. Maybe you didn't think about it, or maybe you didn't want to be bothered. I don't mind. You can do it. You can do it on Yontif. Therefore, yeah, the filter could work better on Erev Yontif. The filter would work just as well on Erev Yontif to be set up on Erev Yontif. Doesn't matter. You're allowed to set it up on Yontif. Okay. This concludes our initial analysis of the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Eliezer generally is very anti-oil. He's very anti-structure building, but he's very, very pro food preparation and even the preparation for food preparation. And therefore, he has one exception. So I'll ask you a trivia question. Rabbi Eliezer, what is his viewpoint on building oils? Oh, absolutely opposed, unless it's already attached. Is there an exception? Yeah. Oichel nefesh. Rabbi Eliezer is ready to suspend just about any melacha to be able to prepare for food on Yontif, even if you should have been able to do it before Yontif. So that is the bottom line of our Gemara's understanding and explanation of Rabbi Eliezer. But now we have to examine the Chachamim's perspective. So the Mishnah tells us, the Chachamim Oimrim, what did the Chachamim say? Ein toilin es ha-mishamaras b'Yontif, ve'ein noistim b'Shabbos. One may not suspend a strainer on Yontif. So the Chachamim do not agree with Rabbi Eliezer. They will not allow the construction, the preparation of this hechsher. You may use a strainer to have wine on Yontif because you're allowed to prepare food. We're not going to let you set it up. Here is the question. Tala. If he actually did the malacha on Shabbat, on Yontif, Tala Mai. What is the halacha? Actually, is he doing this on Yontif or on Shabbos? I think we'd be talking about on Shabbos. Tala, if he set up a strainer, what's the halacha? Did he do a malacha? Does he have to bring a chatas, or is it only the Rabbana? Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Tala, chayiv chatas. To set up this structure, you've done a biblical act of oil. Bring a carbon chatas. That's a very extreme take on this. Obviously, we're talking about the person did it unintentionally, so he has to do a chatas. Amrli Abaya. Abaya says, really? Elameata talakuza besichsa. If you put I'm going to use Rabbi Steinsaltz's translation here, a jug on a peg, is that also boina? Tala kli katan b'magod. There's a protruding peg out of the building, and you hang a kli. Is that also boina? We'll have to explore the. Rashi. Hachanami de mechayev. V'hacha mai chiyuv ha'ika. What was the liability? V'oyel arai. Because what you did is a temporary thing. Bringing gomer loy heva midrabanan hu de mitzar. This action is not a rabbinic.
If we work according to this, then if I take my coat on Shabbos and put it on a hook, I'm building an oil.
Yeah, I mean, Lamaisa, we don't say that, but yeah. So Abaya says, no way. What we're talking about is a temporary action, and that's certainly not going to be a biblical prohibition. If it's prohibited, it's only midrabanan. Elomar Abaya clarifies or argues midrabanan he. It is only midrabanan. Why? Why don't the Rabbanan allow you to be toila? Why don't they allow you to set up this strainer? To prevent. Oh no, I'm sorry. Why do the Chachamim prohibit this? Kuza b'sichsa. They don't allow you to hang a jug on a peg, which again I don't still fully understand, but let's read it and then we'll try to understand it. It is not midaraisa; it's only midrabanan. But they don't want you to do weekday things to act on Shabbos in a matter of chol. Rashi. The Chachamim want to induce us to avoid. They want us to avoid uvdin dechol. No, hold on. I think I explained it wrong. I think I said it right the first time. I think we have to say the reason why the Chachamim prohibited the strainer. It is only to avoid uvdin dechol. But midaraisa, it is certainly not prohibited. Yeah, I think that's the correct way of reading this.
Rabbi.
Yes.
When it comes to preparing food, how do we distinguish between preparing and improving? Because straining is not really preparing, it's just making it more palatable or whatever.
Well, we can debate that. For example, if you remember, Dr. Stalmer and I had a conversation about Rashi, and the inference from Rashi was that we were straining just the dregs. And maybe that's why, because we're actually making it available altogether. But to be honest, I believe part of the act of improving is part of the food preparation process, and the license is for all steps of food preparation. So you might say, is putting on a dressing on a salad, is that a improvement or is that the essential? Well, it depends who you ask. Some of my kids won't eat salad if it is dressed, and some of my kids won't eat the salad if it isn't dressed. So anyway, so really, even if it is not essential, who decides? It's part of the food preparation. It's part of the yontif license to prepare. So again, Elam Rabaya midrabanan, the whole prohibition of tliya, of hanging the mishameres, is not midaraisa, it's midrabanan, and it's to avoid weekday behavior.
You know, weekday behavior is really such a broad topic. Or, I mean, there's so many things that we do on an everyday basis that we also have to do, we do on Shabbos. I mean, where do you stop? I mean, I get dressed during the week. I get dressed during on Shabbos. I get dressed maybe in different clothing, but not always. I mean, a lot of people wear suits and ties.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll tell you more than that. This development totally changes our understanding of the Mishnah. Initially, we're looking at this Mishnah saying, you know, making this filter, this is a structure, this is a problem. But by the end, it's only D'Rabbanan, it sounds like. And that might have implications, Lamaisa, how we paskin. And so I should just read, I'm going to read for you just to confuse things. I'm sorry, I should have rephrased what I just said. Abaya's comments lead to a big question and divergence in understanding the Gemara. Some opinions say that the whole issue of straining is purely a d'Rabbanan. So Rashi says later on in the Gemara that the whole Mishameres deal is entirely not at all because of oil. It's only uvdin dechol. Others disagree. But it sounds like, according to Rashi, Abaye is saying that the whole issue is purely an uvdin dechol issue. Dr. Stamler, you're right. We need to understand better the whole sugya of uvdin dechol. Hold on, actually, let me see something.
Menachem, it's very simple. You brush your teeth every day, but on Shabbos, you don't use an electric toothbrush. So that's what they're talking about.
But yeah, this deserves a little more. The Gemara is not entirely done with this discussion, but this definitely deserves some further treatment.
Well, we have that concept of not Shabbos dick. So
No, the real question, Dr. Stammer, what you're asking, which I think is a good one, is where do we apply it and where do we not apply it?
right.
Because there are many
Okay.
things that we do
How
on
do we
Shabbos.
decide what? Yeah, exactly.
So basically, it would be interesting to see a comprehensive list of all of the things that we say are considered uvdin l'chol and therefore are prohibited, versus the list of things that are not included in that list and therefore. So, like you said, a person gets dressed on the weekday, you get dressed on Shabbos. Maybe your clothing should not be exactly like your weekday clothing.
You have a person who doesn't have Shabbos clothing, Nebuch. What is
Yeah, our Gemara actually discussed that there were Chachamim who they didn't have another change of clothing, but they wore it in a different style. They wore it higher up or lower down rather, because work people would lift their clothing up so that they didn't become dirty or tattered from the ground. Those that were more affluent wore their clothing long because they weren't engaged in that kind of labor. And how does Abaye, this is really the bigger question, which is, I didn't have the right words, but this is what was bothering me. How does Abaye dispatch with the fact that it is a tent? It's a structure made out of material, out of fabric. How does he just, because look what he does. He didn't give us any explanation, really. He gave us an analogy to another prohibition. And based on logic, he says it's got to be only midrabanan. How did he dislodge? How did he explain away the oil facet? So here I have a quote of the Bach, who we almost went into the halachic discussion. We're not going to have time today, I don't think. The Bach asks, how does Abaye know that it's not mishum oil? And his answer is that if hanging material was actually an issue of oil, then we would extend much further the prohibitions of hanging other types of items. From the fact that hanging other stuff is not prohibited, it's clear that it's not considered oil. I'm not sure if I understand that, but that's the language the Bach uses.
Maybe oil, I'm just going to check, is considered something like in the form of some kind of a canopy that protects you from something from above it.
You're saying that the concept of oil usually is
what is the concept of oil?
So you're saying it's like it's an inverted oil.
Right. So maybe that in that respect, it's not an oil. An oil by definition has to protect you for something, from the elements, from the sun, from the rain. So maybe that is the difference.
Interesting. No, it's very interesting. I mean, everyone's calling it an oil aray, so we're not talking about a permanent structure. That we can all agree. Excuse me.
I think we need to differentiate between the construction element of it, where you take a strained a piece of material and you put it over a structure to strain something, and between the function of what you're doing. So the actual work may be the same. You're putting something over a round area. If something would be underneath, it would be an oil. But because we're doing it from the top, it may not be an oil. So yeah, I think you have to differentiate between the function, the outcome, and the actual construction.
And the permanence.
Yeah, but what happens if all of a sudden it starts raining and you stretch that garment, put it on a second hook, and you're covered?
Here, look.
It's only if you get underneath it.
Yeah.
I just want to show you, this is the tour. It was a lengthy discussion about oil, different types of oil. He talks about an oil aray, which is not a full-fledged structure, but it has functional aspects or visual aspects of an oil. So he gives treatment to the question here. Hold on 1 second.
Does he say that an oil aray is permitted? Because if that is, then why can't we open up an umbrella?
So hold on. So I just want to show you, that's a good question. I just want to show you his language on this specific issue, and then we can try to talk about other issues. Let me see if I can find it again. I lost the place. Mishameret shetoilin oisai, a filter that's hung laseis bashamarim with the purpose of placing into it shamarim lisanin. And you stretch out. He says that this is considered an oil, and therefore one may not do so. So he paskins not like Abaya, he paskins like Rav Yosef. I'd be curious to see the commentaries, the Beis Yosef, and let's look at the Beis Yosef. We're gonna have to scroll a bit.
I wanted to see. He continued to talk something about a chuppah for chatanim.
Hilat chatanim. Which is also
what exactly did he say about it? I didn't get
Kilat Chatanim, by the way, you know what it is? It's like a bed with a canopy over, I believe. It's a bed with a, but hold on, I just want to give you
wait a minute. But he says
a four poster.
Okay. Yeah.
It's called a four poster.
Hold on, I just want to see the Beis Yosef, who's going to give a lot of treatment, who presumably is going to give the full treatment of this. Bear with me. Mishamer Shatelin Isa. So he quotes our Gemara. Bilazar Amar Telin Isa Mishameres B'Yantiv. Chamer Ein Telin. Pirish Rashi Mishameres. No, he doesn't give an additional opinion. He just quotes the subject. So it's interesting. It's interesting to note what the halacha l'maisa, the determination in our Gemara is. Let me just look at one more thing. Bear with me. Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, Shin Tes Vav. Let's open another. Halacha, Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, Shin Tes Vav. Tes. Mishameres. Shetoilin Oisa. Lasis Bashamarim Lisanein. Umoischim Pia Lechotzad. Chashuv Asiyas Oyel. V'asur Lintoisa. In the laws of Shabbos, we are told that this Mishameres, the filter, may not be constructed because of oil. You cannot set it up. That is the way it trickles down halacha l'maisa, reflective of what we saw in the Torah and others. Let's see the Taz real fast. No. All right, the reality is, we're getting ahead of ourselves because we're not really done with the Gemara. So I wanted to take a look a little bit, but we shouldn't go way past our let me just look at one more thing. Let's look at the halach of Yantif, which is Tuf Kuf Yud. Hold on.
It's amazing to me that with a click of a button we can check all the mafarshim.
Is it amazing?
It's an amazing thing.
Our parents and grandparents, or the rabbis, they would say this is Mashiach. Mashiach is access to knowledge of Torah and Hashem. To have this degree of access, it's messianic.
I was never exposed to that, and usually you get Mareh Mekomos and all that, but that we're doing it actually, Allah Hamas, I mean, in real time is amazing.
It's a good reason to support Safaria, by the way.
Yeah. It's an incredible resource. The amount of Torah that they have enabled is mind-boggling. Ein toilin hamishameres biyantif. One may not set up the filter lisanim b'shamarim in order to filter dregs. There's maybe a better word, but if it's all set up, muter litain b'shamarim lisanin. You're allowed to place in these dregs in to filter it. Umarim v'toila oisa litain barimayim. So this is probably from the Gemara later on. but you could put first inside Rimonim and then Shamarim. So generally speaking, filtering is not good, but for Yantif, for this purpose, it can be done. And but ideally, based on a Gemara we're going to see later on, or teaching we're going to see later on, you should first put in Rimonim, have it as a bowl maybe.
So people who smoke filter cigarette have to worry?
Hold on, let's look. This is the beer halacha of the Mishnah Berurah.
I don't think the Rimonim is an issue of a bowl. I think it's to put Rimonim to make a drink and to put Shmar into the Rimonim to
maybe let's see. I'm confessing my ignorance here.
To make a drink out of the pomegranate.
Maybe. Interesting, maybe. Again, we're still in the beginning of the Gemara. So I'm not sure. We're gonna see soon. Or maybe not, actually. I don't know. Here, let's take a look. Just give me another moment here. Let's look through here. After have a malacha Gemara, reflecting what our Gemara said. To filter, that's a malacha. Boyer. And on Shabbos, you be chayav chatas hazeh. Kidei so b'shas, as the Gemara says. The yantif motor mishum deheva oichal nefesh. On yantif, it's food preparation. You're allowed to cook, which is a malacha. You're allowed to carry, which is a malacha, because oichal nefesh. After the il aser boyer adei nafeh chabar. Although you cannot use any kind of filter or sieve on yantif. Hasam mishum dal yidei kelim elu derech lasos yamim harbe. With the other types of filtering, it's done in advance. It's done right before. So it's not considered, it doesn't have the same sense of a malacha, and therefore it's totally permitted. That's the halacha. Let's look fast into the Mishnah Berurah. He uses the same language as all of the Mefarshim. He quotes Tosfos that obviously it is preferred the way you're doing it today. So yesterday, even though Rabbi Lazarus in the Gemara, we say Paskins that he doesn't mind, but Lamaisa, we Paskin here that it should ideally be done only if it improves immediately. Ooh, that's where I was wrong. The harama here is, I missed the word. There's a trick. You could set it up as a bowl. Because when you're using it as a bowl, I guess then it's not an oil, then it's, I'm not sure why. All right, you know what this teaches me? There's more to learn. There's a lot more to learn. But this is from the Gemara, so we need to learn some more. All right, my dear friends, I think we're gonna call it a day. My dear friends, I want to wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos. Ayasher Koyach. Thank you for being on board as we embark on a new chapter and as we begin our initial ascent to a Siyum on Maseches Shabbos. Again, 20 blots, 40 pages. It'll be a good few months, but we're getting there. And so Yasher Koyach and Mazel Tov. I wish everyone a wonderful day, a wonderful Shabbos. Parshas Noach. And we look forward to everyone's return. Gesundheit and Freilich Heit, hopefully soon. And again, a wonderful Shabbos, and thank you.
Bernie, were you on the Zoom yesterday?
Beryl,
I was, but whatever.
Here, I'm gonna Beryl. You have Dr. Hammer's number?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, right.
No, I want to know. I want permission to call him.
You have my permission to call.
he gave me permission to call you.
There must be restrictions. You only have a few minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Good Shabbos. Yasher Koyach, everyone.
Not the next half hour, Beryl. So that's
okay. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.